Hey everybody, good morning. It's going to be a scorcher. Welcome to the Waterfront Conference. I'm Kathy Robb, the principal and founder of Robb Water Partners, and I'm honored to serve as the board chair of the Waterfront Alliance. On behalf of the entire board and staff, thank you so much for joining us this morning as we consider together how best to future-proof our waterfront. I'm thrilled to be here today with you. Because of your dedication to what we all must do for a better water future, we have made so much progress that I've been proud to be a part of. But we all know we have so much more to do. As the climate landscape around us shifts, future-proofing our waterfronts will require us to partner to do hard things and quickly. We have come together today to share what works and to consider how to best strengthen the systems that will make resilience real and lasting. Our conversations today will create sparks that will grow throughout the year. I want to take a minute to tell you some of the things that the Waterfront Alliance has been up to since we gathered here last year. We secured $1.3 million from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as a catalyst investment for the 132nd Street Pier, an equitable waterfront space that Waterfront Alliance and South Bronx Unite have advocated for over many years. We trained over 500 new WEDGE associates at city and state agencies, design firms, and environmental groups on sustainable practices in waterfront design. Partnering with several other like-minded organizations, we met with over 20 elected officials on our third annual Albany Lobby Day to promote resilience. We led the Flushing Meadows Corona Park Resilience Project through the 10% conceptual design milestone to mitigate chronic flood at that 895-acre park. We launched the Coney Island Creek Resiliency Study in partnership with the Coney Island Beautification Project. And through our Education and Climate-Informed Communities program, we reached 1,500 students and 5,000 people in our community to build a more prepared and climate-ready New York City. We are very tired. All these programs and more, like the panel Women on the Waterfront that we convened in March at the South Street Seaport Museum, contribute to future-proofing our waterfront. They rely on partnerships with all of you. We cannot even consider the future without acknowledging the students, tomorrow's leaders in the maritime industry and environmental sectors. 70 students from nearly 30 public and private colleges are here today, selected by application for a scholarship to the conference, generously supported by the New York City Economic Development Corporation. I'd like to ask our scholars to stand and be recognized. Wow. Thanks to all of you for being here. Please interact with each other and find out what these students are doing and how we can help best support them. A special thanks to our remarkable board of directors of the Waterfront Alliance who make so much possible. You will see many of them here today. And of course, our new terrific President and CEO, Julie Raskin, whom you'll hear from in just a little bit. Those of you who have come to the conference at the museum over the past few years may notice something different. There's no more construction. There is now a completed and exceptional resilience project in the park surrounding us. We're going to honor that project as well as the Battery Park City North and West, sorry about that, North and West projects at our gala this year. I hope you'll join us on October 14th aboard the Hornblower Infinity. We're departing from Pier 61 for an evening of fun on the water. Thanks again for being here. To tell you more about the Battery Park City work, I'm thrilled to welcome Raju Mann, President and CEO of Battery Park City Authority, to say more about where we're spending our time together today. Raju.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. How's it going? Good. Yeah. Okay. All right. Dan Dixon, how you doing? Great. Dan. Yeah. Dan. I bring Dan. Dan works at the Battery Park City Authority, and he's always the loudest clapper in the room. So I bring him everywhere I go. Thanks, Dan. He's also the Senior Director of Planning and Design, his more important role. So welcome to Battery Park City. My name is Raju Mann. Thank you for the kind words, Kathy. Just want to repeat some kind words back to Kathy about the Waterfront Alliance. I mean, I think it's really, really important in New York and the region as a whole. We don't take organizations like this for granted. The nonprofit landscape is a challenging landscape, and we are so blessed in New York City to have organizations like the Waterfront Alliance really dreaming about a better future on our behalf. So just an encouragement for all of us to stay involved and engage in supporting their work moving forward. So a brief note about the Battery Park City Authorities. We were created in 1968, so we're kind of an elder, middle-aged organization. And we were created, by Governor Rockefeller at the time. His brother, David Rockefeller, ran Chase Manhattan Bank. And they dreamed up some big ideas about the future of Lower Manhattan in the form of Battery Park City. And for, the better part of 50 or so years, the focus was really on developing the neighborhood, creating wonderful open spaces. If you got a chance to wander around, you've seen some of those, building buildings with our development partners. And then Sandy happened. And like much of the city, but especially much of coastal New York, we had to rethink who we were and why we existed. And so my predecessors at the authority really reorganized in many ways the organization to focus around future-proofing the Battery Park City waterfront and in turn, Lower Manhattan. And that was part of a coordinated strategy that was developed in the Bloomberg years and has continued, I would say, quite notably through de Blasio, Mayor Adams, and the current mayor. So it's been a long-standing commitment over many administrations to make sure that we're actually protecting the future of Lower Manhattan. And that's been really our focus over the last several years. Last year when I spoke briefly, I sort of gestured out that way. We had a park that was still under construction. And as Kathy noted, that park is now open. So hopefully you've had a chance to visit, or you'll pop out for a coffee or lunch break and wander around. And you'll see that it doesn't look and feel like a flood protection project. It looks and feels like a park. It just happens to help protect Lower Manhattan as part of a coordinated set of efforts. And then really the work ahead right now is around the mile and 1.4 miles to the north, where we're just starting construction on a 5-year project that's part of the city's overall Lower Manhattan strategy that will collectively, protect about 2 miles of coastline, protect, thousands and thousands of residents, thousands of jobs, the World Trade Center site and the PATH station. So we're really excited to be here in this moment of actual execution around these really critical projects that we've been dreaming about for several years. And you can see that I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of the quality of work that the team and our great partners in the private sector have done. There's a few lessons from that work I thought I'd just kind of raise here as we think about the next generation of projects and what we might learn from the prior generation of projects. I think, the first question, and I talked about this a little bit last year as well, is this ongoing, pesky question around regulatory reform that obviously has become a bigger and bigger conversation in the last couple of years, especially in the housing landscape. I think we've all been tracking the ways in which the city and the state are trying to remove barriers to the construction of housing. There's a parallel effort that needs to happen around climate infrastructure that's still, I'd say, very early days in the making. But just to give you, one anecdote, for the Northwest project, this 1.4 miles of flood protection heading north from here, we've got about 40 agencies that require approval and review of the project. And that's probably a conservative estimate. It's probably a low estimate. So that's at the state, city, and federal level. And so I think we should be asking ourselves the question, is that the right way for us to be delivering these kinds of projects? with that level of agency review, and in some cases conflicting perspective. So I think that's a piece of work that I think if we're serious about these projects moving forward, we need to find a different strategy around, because it is very, very hard to deliver these projects with that framework. I think the second piece, which is related to the first, is the kind of governance question, which I know is a topic of many of these panel discussions, is are the organizations set up as having a clear mandate around climate adaptation and how we evolve our city? And where does that function really sit in the city of New York? The work in the Bloomberg years really started, I'd say, primarily as an EDC and City Hall effort. Over time, that's evolved into a DEP effort. There's, I think, some clarity around the governance, at least especially in New York City, with as complicated a governance structure as we have. Where does this sit and how does it get delivered on a day-to-day basis? And then I think the third question, at least for me, that I continue to bump into is how do our politics and community conversations around climate adaptation shift so that we see these as essential projects? And I think that is, a very deep and challenging question, depending on the neighborhoods you're working in. But I don't think it works if you don't have the first two pieces in place as well. And so I think as you all, have discussions today, I just would ask you to continue to think about those questions. We're certainly grappling with them on our end. How does the Battery Park City Authority evolve to address these kinds of challenges? How do we learn from our experience to help other projects down the road? And I think I said leave with one sort of parting thought, which is that I think one of the really unique things about this place, this physical place, is that it really was just a creation of the human imagination, this neighborhood. And I think we have to find a way, and especially in days like this, to reawaken our imagination. Execution and implementation is very, very hard to do. I think for those of us who are spending all our time doing it, it is a challenging day-to-day effort. But we also have to create a little bit of space for the imagination in terms of thinking about what might we do if we had a little bit of space to think and to dream a little bit. So I hope you guys have some space today to do that. I really encourage you to walk around the neighborhood and have a wonderful conference, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Please welcome to the stage Matthijs Bouw, founder and president of One Architecture and Urbanism.
Good morning. It's very nice to be here. I came to New York City in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy from the Netherlands, where I co-led one of the teams in the Rebuild by Design competition that developed this vision for Lower Manhattan's waterfront called the Big U. And since then, in the last little bit more than a decade, I and many of you have been working really, really hard on New York City's waterfront, increasingly after an understanding of the perils of stormwater flooding, also about the relationship between the waterfronts and our stormwater. And we've learned a lot, and we've achieved a lot. You'll be able to see the projects here in the Lower Battery Park City. In the weekend, I was able to tour people around the East River Park, formerly known as the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, but everyone's forgotten that it's a resiliency project. It's now just a park again, which is wonderful to see. And in that process, we have, as New York, started to set up some of the governance that is necessary to deal with long-term waterproofing of the city. Our institutions have evolved. We have developed a lot of know-how and relationships that help us do this work better. But I also think we've come at a pivotal moment in how we think about protecting and future-proofing our waterfront. And I think that pivotal moment is sort of exemplified by two elements. One of them is that the Bureau of Coastal Resiliency within DEP is there as an organization who is responsible for both the operations and maintenance of the flood protection system, but also of starting to think about the longer term. And what was really interesting to me is that the New York City Panel of Climate Change, in its 2024 assessment, started to give us flood protections for the longer term. It started to say, let's look at 2150, and let's look at different scenarios of what the level of sea level rise can be in 2150. And if you look at that, there's about 10% chance that sea level rise will be about 3.5 feet, which is about this much. That's the optimistic scenario. There's also about a 10% chance that sea level rise will be about 15 feet, which is about that. And so this panel is really about starting to think as we sort of pivot from recovering from Sandy, organizing our practices, learning from what we do well, to starting to think, what else do we need to do to prepare for these uncertain futures? What how do we manage uncertainty? How do we start to think about change that might go pretty slow in the optimistic scenarios, but that could come pretty fast? How do we deal with the uncertainty about the pace of change? How do we, in that context, avoid making the wrong decisions or doubling down on practices that might not work in the long term anymore? And do we indeed, can we find the sort of bigger ideas that are necessary to help us work towards that longer term future? That's what this panel is about, and we have phenomenal guests to help us through that. I'll start with Charlie Wood, who is the Environment Agency, that's the UK government agency, London area director, where she's worked in the environment agencies for about 25 years on climate resilience and emergency planning. And so she oversees the engagements around the Thames Estuary 2100 plan and works on many of the flood initiatives that are around. Charlie, please join us on the stage. Another person I'd like to bring on stage is Meyer, who is the principal of local office landscape architecture and urban design, and a adjunct professor at Stanford. I know his work from the phenomenal work that he's done in New York City and on Long Island. He is really an incredible specialist on working on the barrier islands, but he's also done phenomenal work in Puerto Rico, southern Florida, and many other places, really focusing on resilience and regenerative design. And one of the things that I always really appreciate you bringing to the table is a sort of intercultural understanding between not only diverse groups, but also from your own ancestry as part of the Muisca First Nation in Latin America. So please, Walter, join us here. And the third panelist is Nayeli Rodriguez, who is the Deputy Director of the City of Boston's Office of Climate Resilience. And really that office is set up to allow for an all-of-government approach to preparing for future climate change. She has a background in urban planning, design, and technology, and before this worked at the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics on public realm projects as the first technologist, which is really interesting. Nayeli, please join us on the stage. So my first question is, and it's a bit of a lightning round, is what is the biggest mistake that cities make in planning for uncertain climate futures? Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely not investing enough, not getting the right skills and resources in place. That is fundamentally, I think, the biggest mistake that everybody makes. So if you don't plan now, and put that investment in place, it's not going to bode you well for the future, basically.
And that's both investment in planning as well as in capital projects?
Definitely. So the planning, the monitoring, the evidence, the data that sits behind it, as well as maintaining the existing defences, planning in for the cost of the maintaining of the new defences, as well as building new defences and understanding what will happen to those in the future.
Thanks. Walter?
I learned from the New York City's sister relationship with Copenhagen last year. We had a session, and one of the leaders from Copenhagen said that decades ago, Copenhagen had the same challenge of American cities, where the majority of the staff were one discipline, usually some sort of engineering, and that they deliberately audited the city staff and said, we need a mix of disciplines. The engineers aren't the problem, we just need other people. If you have too many of one type of person, it's a lack of diversity of thought. So now they have philosophers, artists, scientists, social scientists, architects, landscape architects. And she said what it led to was a transformation from a car-centered city that looked like highways in downtown, much like American cities, to one that they could imagine new futures, but also implement those futures and not just be stuck on a shelf. And she said that's what transformed Copenhagen to what it is today. So diversity of thought is what I say is, the cultural energy of American cities can use some of that auditing that Copenhagen went through.
Yeah, I really like that. I think long-term change and making the transition to a different future is often a cultural problem.
And we still need the engineers to build.
Yeah.
So not just in the engineers, it's the diversity of thought.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Nayeli?
I guess I'll sort of build off of that one, which is I think that we are seeing that in terms of investment, I guess, in these futures, maybe this sort of blends these 2 points, governments and human beings don't necessarily invest according to rational thinking. They have an ability to invest in very irrational things and to not invest in very rational things. And if people were investing in climate adaptation purely from a rational point of view, we would have solved a lot of our funding challenges a long time ago, because at least in Massachusetts, $1 invested in resilience saves $13 later, but we still have massive funding challenges ahead. So I think over-relying on rational arguments and science to make the case for continued investment is not proving to be the solution that we need. And I think we do have to invest in more of these imaginative, kind of like culturally led arguments.
Yeah, I really like that. In a sense, resilience is a form of savings, and we are not very good at saving, right? We'd rather spend and enjoy things in the here and now. One of the things that I'm also very interested in is how do you sort of mobilize the private sector on these type of issues? I feel that, especially if you're thinking about the long term, we need to sort of realize that many of the stuff that gets built now will be there way beyond the mortgage or the exit point of a developer or the sort of 50 years that often design guidelines are built for. They will be there for a century. And if we don't really help everyone in the city understand these long-term challenges, we are building in, with everything that we build now, a lot of future problems as well. And that's one of the things that I am very worried about. Charlie, my question to you is, and I think that's also inspired by what the Bureau of Coastal Resiliency is trying to do now, is to try to start thinking about this longer term future. They started a process in which they developed a sort of a coastal futures lab. They are starting to, in the RISE project, lead up to a coastal master plan, which really wants to look even beyond the end of the century. You're working on that in the Thames 2100 project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And in that context, understand how do you plan across different sea level rise scenarios, and how do you think about trigger points and thresholds as you develop this planning?
Yeah, sure. So the Thames Estuary 2100 plan was published in 2012. And you know, the main problem was how do we protect a global city from flooding when the risk is carrying on increasing, and how do we do that over the next 100 years to the end of the century, to 2100. So London sits within the tidal floodplain, and we luckily already have a complex system of barriers and walls, so over 300 kilometres of assets, over 3,000 of those assets. And that was all built after the 1953 floods that saw some significant flooding. It's protecting over 1.5 million people and £400 billion worth of residential property and numerous critical infrastructure. The system is under growing pressure of sea level rise and ageing defences. And the Thames Estuary 2100 plan is a really different plan that allows us to think about a number of alternative scenarios in the future and plan for a number of different pathways. So we look at a number of different triggers, which include, you know, how often what the sea level rise is doing, how big the population is getting and what that costs, river flows, how often we're operating the Thames barrier, so our big tidal defence, and what that means, especially for our assets going forward. And we have a monitoring review of that plan, so every 5 years and 10 years, and we've just done a 5-yearly review of the plan. So that's the 15-year review, which has shown that sea level is rising faster than we expected, assets are deteriorating, and we need to, you know, obviously act now. And that's allowed us to know that the upstream defences from the Thames barrier will need to be raised 15 years earlier than we previously thought. And we're going to need to take those interventions sooner. So with monitoring those thresholds, we can take the decisions and take them at the right moment in time, hold the options open, which allows you to be more efficient on your money and know what the climate's doing in those moments. So we've delivered an awful lot in the first 10 years, and we've learned a lot, a huge amount that I could, you know, talk about forever, because it's just so interesting to come here to New York, and especially in Manhattan, and look around and see what you're doing. And it's interesting to reflect back on what would we have done differently. Are there things that we can share with you on how that's working? And obviously the investment piece is the biggest thing. Invest now for the future. There's no regrets. Just do it. But the other things that we have definitely learned is look at the system in totality. You can't have one part of the system working and the other part's not. Then it doesn't work as a system and everyone's not defended. But that also helps us from a cost-benefit analysis point of view. So where we're needing to do the new maintenance or build new defences, it means that we can fairly protect everybody, not just the City of London where the economic hub is, where the cost-benefit analysis stacks up, but actually for everybody and protects everyone across the board. I think the other thing is around the language and the politics. Trying to get people in 2012 to think about 2100 was just mind-boggling to them. The intervention dates for us were 2035, 2040, 2050, 2070, 2100. That was just too far away. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about end-of-century options. To them, that was too far in the future, not something that they needed to do now. It wouldn't be within their lifetime. We'll leave that to the next generation. So we definitely need to adapt and think about what that language is and how we can, make that easier for people to understand. People are really complacent. The barrier is there. The defences are there. They're protected twice a day. They do not even know that that happens. And if they do know, they're like, well, it's always going to work. It'll be fine. I don't need to do anything about it. I don't need to protect myself. So there's something there in that language and the politics and making sure that people understand that. And the other thing that we've had is, one of the things that I said about the plan was to keep the options open for the long term and take the intervention at the right moment. We've discovered that that's causing us some problems. And maybe that isn't the right way. So in one of the areas we're looking for where we need to build a new Thames barrier is in the outer estuary, but everybody wants to build there. So there's a lot of growth proposed in that area, a lot of investment needed in that area, and leaving that option open of whether we might build a Thames barrier or not in the future, the possibility of compulsory purchasing the land and all of that is causing too much uncertainty, which people just don't want. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a bit of an oversight of what the plan is, how we do adapt and keep those pathways open, but also some lessons learned for the first time that we've been running it.
Yeah, I think that issue of spatial reservations is a truly big one. I've seen that also in the Netherlands, where I've been part of the knowledge program on sea level rise, where we look at 7 feet and again 15 feet of sea level rise, and figuring out what space we need to reserve for future defenses has been really critical, because you want to get in very early in that, because otherwise you pay a premium on having to build these things later. And I thought that was always very, very interesting. Could you talk a little bit more about how the governance of the Thames 2100 works, and how you engage with stakeholders around these type of topics?
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the other lessons, definitely, to be learned. The plan is not statutory. It's not written in law, which makes it really hard to enforce. So there are laws around the River Thames, which means that riparian owners, those that are on the edge of the river, have to maintain their defence right in front of them. And if they don't do that, and we need to come in, and so we have powers to come in and redo that defence, we can then charge them. But it just never works. So it means that they'll then just leave it, and we just step in and repair it. So having a plan that's statutory and written in law is really key. We would have had, potentially more teeth to look to the longer term to be able to do that. We also, which I know you have similar, there are lots of layers and tiers of government and governance. So we have 32 boroughs in London with a mayor that has no overall responsibility for flood risk. And then we have the government. And then we, the Environment Agency, are an arm's length body of government that have the oversight of all of flood risk. So, that's just painting a slight picture of the complication that sits in there. So it is difficult. We also currently are in, same as everybody else, a bit of an economic crisis where the NHS spending, so, our healthcare, defence are priorities for us. Climate resilience, flood risk, will drop down along with transport and other things. So trying to get that at the top of the political agenda when we have a very unstable political landscape right now in the last 2 weeks, it's tough.
Not only in the last 2 weeks.
Yes, particularly in the last 2 weeks. We've had our local elections, which has thrown our whole country from a 2-party into 4. Which is very
a new king in the north, right? Walter, going back to this idea of how you build in flexibility and adaptive capacity, that's something that interests me a lot, right? And if you design like we do, partly the sort of hard infrastructure to do that, we always want to make sure that we that we, rather than overbuild early, we allow for future adaptation by making spatial reservations or other things. We also really want to avoid making solutions that don't work in the long term. Raising the ground floor of a building to a certain level works only to a certain sea level rise, and after that it's very difficult to raise things further, right? And so we always think about how to optimize that. And increasingly we also know that we not only deal with coastal challenges and coastal storm risk, but we also need to think about stormwater and how the stormwater will start changing whenever you build something coastal. You work a lot with nature. You are really an advocate for more regenerative practices, also from the argument that nature can grow and is in a way more adaptive, more flexible over time. Can you talk a little bit more about the sort of lessons that you learn from nature and how we can start using nature at scale to perform some of the services that we need?
Yeah, well, one of the challenges with nature in a city, there's not a lot of room for nature in a city, right? So a lot of it's making room for nature.
Is your mic working, by the way?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, I'll speak loud in the back. There's not a lot of room in cities. The denser they get, the less room there is for nature.
Yeah.
And so you're either working the real estate market to make room for nature, and I'm not talking about eminent domain, I'm talking about informal purchasing through missing teeth and finding your way organically to make room for nature, working upland. Or you find ways to get double load out of a square foot, meaning fitting nature underground, on the surface, above you, in the facades, on the roofs, and it depends on the issue. In the case with working in Miami, the groundwater is just a foot or two below your feet, and the geology is so porous that you can't just stuff water in the ground or you'll flood your neighbors that are slightly lower than you. It just migrates horizontally. And so the challenges there are to look at its deep history, and a lot of the work, for indigenous practice is to look at the verbal history that goes back in this hemisphere to the last ice age. And these are just cycles, these are just cycles at different scales, but the cycles are getting more aggressive and quicker, and that's what's shifted. In the case with Miami, you have to start with the groundwater. And anytime you're working in places like Zone 1 of New York, you have to start with the groundwater. And it's not a single entity, it's not level, it mounds and does all these different flows. And we don't really understand the groundwater of New York City, for example, but we were commissioned 14 years ago to design New York City's first net zero neighborhood with HPD on hundreds of acres of New York City land in Rockaway. And it floods at high tide, and it's already too late, right? So it's, and so in that it was finding nature to fit under roadbeds. How can roadbeds double as living streets so they can convey water under them, right? Because places like Staten Island have blue belts, and blue belts are awesome. You can daylight rivers, and that's the best way to do it when you have space. When you don't have space, your roads have to become the blue belts, right? And they have to move that water underneath and connect the ecosystem, the ocean, to what was upland before, so that we're not stuffing water in the ground and flooding neighbors upland. So a lot of it is looking at the larger systems, and we have science that aligns with a lot of the indigenous knowledge. Thankfully, with the studies of Eric Sanderson, who's been a mentor of mine since I moved to New York, his work is really important to quantifying, the decision making, and thankfully he's a part of the governance and decision making in the outer boroughs moving forward. So the answer is making room for nature in the city requires science, requires the deep ancestral knowledge, and it requires an understanding of the market, because unfortunately capitalism is like water. It follows the path of least resistance. Mm-hmm. And some of the tools apply. You can literally take GIS tools from hydrology and apply it to the market, which is fascinating. So.
Yeah. Do you think that we're appreciating nature at the right scale, or do you imagine that if we start to build for a long-term future, that we need to start considering more aggressively land use changes to give space to nature to perform these services?
And we were discussing earlier in Boston, which is really dense in downtown, we don't have the tool of eminent domain that generations had in the past, and it's really not socially an effective tool. The most impact is to set up a large trust fund and use the interest rate from that trust fund to buy parcels over time and incrementally buy this out. Thankfully, New York has that program to do that through the new model after the New Jersey Blue Acres program, and we're getting there, but it has to be at scale. I mean, we have to think about the whole bite of New York, the New York bite, that is, Montauk to Barnegat Light, like the whole bathymetry of the Hudson Canyon and its relationship to our decisions upstream from there. It's really a polyscale challenge. We have to think at the same time about your garden in your backyard and the New York bite.
That's super interesting. And that's hard, right? And I think one of the things that I work with a team of economists to sort of map out in the Netherlands the different scenarios, but also map them out whether they went slow or fast, right? And if sea level rise goes fast, we're going to be in a lot of trouble because of a lot of societal, like you cannot surf on capital flows anymore. There are going to be big winners and losers. It's going to be bringing real significant distress. If it goes slower, this process, we might have a shot. One of the things is what I like about your background and your position in the city of Boston is that you really try to think like how can we adapt to a changing climate, but also how can we align that with, let's say, the urban dynamics? How can we make sure that on the one hand we capture resources from the Army Corps, but layer in city betterments? How can we develop workforce programs? Could you talk a little bit more about how you, the city of Boston, also specifically you as an urban thinker, think about this relationship between, let's say, the urban dynamics, urban change, and climate change and rising sea levels?
Yeah, sure. It's one of the things that is both most scary but also exciting, I think, about working in this kind of all-of-government approach in our office. I will say that honestly, the work that we're trying to do, adapting 47 miles of coastline, 50% of which the city doesn't even own. We don't even own our own coastline. It's 50% state. It's actually another 30% private. So there's a lot of partnerships that have to come into this. The time frame that we're planning for is 30 to 100 years, similar to your challenge. It's not a human time scale, and it's definitely not a time scale that corresponds to the urban dynamics of capital planning every 5 years, administration change every 4, at multi-levels of government. So I think there's it's more art than science trying to come up with systems that can, endure through these different time scales. And, like every other city who's doing this work, we take a belt and suspenders approach sometimes. We have our coastal flood resilience overlay district that kind of ties new development in the floodplain to 2070. Civil rise, I think one interesting challenge I'm thinking about is how do we plan not only for if things get worse, but also if we do our jobs right and if we are successful, how do we embed that in our in our dynamic and adaptive scenario planning as well. If we do our jobs right, if all of us are successful in our endeavors, we're actually going to scoop out a lot of risk, hopefully, from a lot of the, urban form. How do we reward good actors in that system? And I guess, while needing to maintain a belt and suspenders approach, I guess if we're able to build out this infrastructure, can we take credit for it? That's like another dynamic. I think on the workforce angle, it's another place where I am quite excited to think about. We have a legacy in Boston. Everybody, the big dig looms extremely large in our planning history. It completely remade the way that Bostonians relate to our public realm and our infrastructure, but it also took a very long time. And we had to have an adaptive history, I think, moving through this next project in the same way. For workforce, I get excited when I think about how we're going to have to start building before we even necessarily have the materials or the technologies in place. We have to start building and assume that they will emerge. So if we're intentional about building that pipeline, not only are we going to have some incredible projects. I think New York is already demonstrating some of the innovations that emerge through implementation, but it's an incredible opportunity for new businesses, for students, that are walking along our waterfront today to become material scientists and, landscape engineers and stuff like that. So we're trying to be intentional about building those workforce pathways at the same time that we're building the park. So imagining what is it going to take to maintain this park once it's built, given all of its new technologies and materials, and then how can we tie that back to the educational and workforce opportunities that we have now. I think maybe one other thing I'm thinking of, if I have time to say one other thing, is I think, I need to wrap up. Well, anyway.
No, you're not. You have time.
Okay.
I'm pointing at it because you have time.
40 seconds.
I guess I call this the half-drunk dunks problem. I know Dunkin' Donuts isn't as like a big cultural icon here as in Boston, but it's very important to us culturally, speaking of culture. And for some reason, people experience these places as everyday places, not necessarily as infrastructure, but it is our job to think about both of those scales. And if there's one half-drunk dunks cup that's like swimming in a bioswale, people are going to read this space as not a priority or not cared for, even if we've spent literally millions of dollars in creating the infrastructure that's underneath. And so now, as an urban planner, it is my job to think about the maintenance cycles of some of this public realm, not only for the half-drunk dunks, but also for how the infrastructure performs and the cadence at which we need to test it. So that's like even another time scale. We're trying to think, okay, it's a 100-year infrastructure, but it needs to be tested every 2 years. That's another workforce question. There's an opportunity for a sort of a civic ritual of testing all of our deployable flood walls every year, drawing attention to this new job, which is opening and closing floodgates. It's another time scale that we're trying to think about and build into the project as it's being implemented and not just think about it once it's all constructed.
Yeah, and I imagine that this element of, let's say, engagement or storytelling is really critical, right? Like building these coastal defenses is expensive. It takes a lot of political will, and so it really requires not only that people sort of understand or connect to it, but it also requires you sort of leveraging all the possible funding sources, because if you don't maximize those funding sources, you're going to maybe design projects that don't have the integration with the urban realm that really you need in order to get the buy-in. Could you talk a little bit more about how you go about that? For instance, in the CSRM project that you're doing now?
Yes. I want to talk about Army Corps. I am conscious that the Army Corps, I would say, it's always like gobbles up all of the oxygen in the room to talk about Army Corps. And once you like invoke the name, that's all we're going to talk about.
We only have 5 minutes left, so we'll be fine.
But CSRM, it is a huge lever, and we can't afford, frankly, to not engage with that potential cash infusion. It requires a ton of patience and, like you say, a ton of political will. I think it's a matter of trying to not, I guess bringing this back to the concept of future-proofing, overly attached to any one static future that we're trying to build to and say, achieved, we're protected. We're trying to build for every project and for every, missing tooth along the coast, many different scenarios that could occur. And with CSRM, that project will play out as we will see, and bring cash to some projects. Other projects, if we need a different approach, we just have to layer on the different partnerships that can kind of like complete the task. Those are also different political timelines. Obviously, Army Corps, it's a federal political relationship. We have to work with MBTA, or like our transit authority, with the state transportation. I think of it like a capital stack, and it kind of lines up to what the infrastructure is like as well. The Army Corps can literally bring the core load-bearing infrastructure piece. I think some of our state partners and private actors can bring a lot to the public realm, and certainly the maintenance challenge. We don't have public-private partnerships, I think, in the same way that New York does, but they bring their piece as well. The city also is responsible for a certain component of that. It's just like stacking these different like revenue structures. And I think similar to London, we don't have statutory like plan enforcement, but we can use public shaming as very valuable. And we do resort to that as well.
for you.
If everybody is responsible for paying for a bit, then everybody is equally, I guess, in danger of having a light shown on them when they don't bring their piece to the puzzle.
So it's public shaming as a value capture mechanism.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with that. Definitely.
No, and I need to move away from the Army Corps, so I'll go straight to London, right? Like,
Yeah, so I was
go
going to
ahead.
use an
Yeah.
example. So, we came up with this approach as part of the Thames Estuary 2100 plan that you'd have a riverside strategy, basically a master plan in sections along the river that obviously interconnected with each other. And City of London is also a borough within London, and they were the first to do it. They were the first to go out, measure all their defences, understand exactly how much they needed to add on which ones. And it's, to be fair, it's a very short stretch, but they also have some quite iconic historic sites like the Tower of London, which obviously you don't want to cut off from the river, you don't want to build a big wall. And the minute that they did it, if you go around and say to the other boroughs, well, the City of London managed to do their riverside strategy and consult on it, and then suddenly they're all like, right, well, we better get on and do ours. And it has worked, And so now we have like 2 or 3 others that are picking up the pace and getting on with it. So I completely agree.
We use the tools that we have available to us.
Exactly. That doesn't cost us any money, right?
Yeah, fantastic. I think a final question is maybe bring it back to our region. I mean, you know our region a little bit. What can you imagine that could be governance and funding arrangements that can help us with our or to address elements of our adaptation challenge? You've been touring the city yesterday. You'll be doing more of that tomorrow. You've been talking to Lorian Farrell in London, I think, last week. So there's a lot of exchange. Do you have any tips for us?
So I think, there's a lot to be learned from how we wrote the Thames Estuary 2100 plan and how you look at those triggers over time. And I think that would be really, really helpful for New York. But what I've learned as I've come here, because you don't have some of those existing defenses, is that you're looking at the whole water cycle at the same time, so looking at the stormwater. So maybe you could build on the Thames Estuary 2100 plan and have it for all flood risk. And have it all the way to 2100, and stick to the plan, invest in the plan would be my top tips.
Walter.
Well, we were joking how we were all here to learn from Charlie. She's way out of her league, or we're out of her league, or whatever that is. But what's amazing about Charlie and her experience in London in general is they're living our future about 50 years out. We're talking about all these barriers being built in various places, including one, the equivalent of a Thames barrier would be between Rockaway and Sandy Hook. It's a singular investment that solves a lot of problems, but we're learning from you the cultural complacency that comes with these, right?
Yeah.
And the risks connected to that. The equivalent of having Venice and London on a session would be incredible. Living, and also Venice is now having to update their system. So interesting to see you guys leagues ahead. But I just want to also just recognize Nayeli's work in Boston as an indigenous leader in governance, making decisions, and I think it's exciting to see. In the last administration, we had indigenous leadership throughout. In the federal government, Secretary of Interior, and it's an exciting time where science and ancient knowledge are coinciding.
Nayeli, help us.
Well, okay, one of the most, I think, like mind-boggling and exciting, interesting, I think, problem-solving approaches that I think can be applied here, I actually first thought of here a couple years ago. I was taking a tour of the Fidei Seaport project, and the planner from EDC, Blake, I don't know if you're here today, Blake, shout out to Blake, he blew my mind with this. He was talking about how they're already thinking about supply chain and materials for that project, and that was when it was not in construction, it was not even in permitting, it was still in planning, and they were thinking about like where they're gonna source concrete and glass. So big is the ambition, and I was sort of taken aback by that and had to think about how we could apply that to our projects in Boston, which are like even proto-planning sometimes. But I think that whatever inspiration gave them the idea to already start thinking about that, it was a good one, and they should pursue that. I'm curious to see where that project has gone, thinking about the supply chains that you're not even going to necessarily need to tap into, or materials manufacturers that will be servicing projects that are still yet to be constructed.
Yeah, no, the project is still being worked on, and what is super interesting is that part of this material thinking also has a strong climate mitigation component, right?
Yes.
And maybe I conclude this with that you want coastal flood risk and stormwater flood risk linked, but I think you also want adaptation and mitigation better linked. Thank you so much for being here for this conversation. Great.
Please welcome to the stage, Julie Raskin, Waterfront Alliance's President and CEO.
Hi. It is so thrilling to be here and to be with all of you, all 883 of you. Don't tell the venue. This is our biggest waterfront conference yet, and I think probably our best. It's just incredible to see you all. My husband told me not to say this, but I do think this is like the Christmas or insert holiday of your choice for waterfront nerds. So I feel the excitement in the room and just really honored to be a part of it. For those of you who don't know our work the other 364 days of the year, and yes, we go straight back to work tomorrow, we are building waterfronts that work for the future. And that means waterfronts that work for our people, for our economy, and for the climate. And we could not do that with all of you in this room today. You are here, whether you are a professional, a student, a volunteer, an advocate, or a citizen, you have chosen to build a better future for this region at a moment when that could not be more important. And this convening and our work year-round would not be possible without the support of our incredible sponsors and supporters. So let me see if I can get my nautical sponsorship levels right. Thanks to our Commodore sponsors, Red Hook Terminals and Battery Park City Authority. Thank you to our captain level sponsors, Dewberry, AECOM, Con Edison, Stantec, NYSERDA, South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, and Rob Water Partners. And please take time throughout the day to connect with all of our sponsors and exhibitors and check out our digital tote bag. There should be a QR code that has materials in the conference app as well. It's been a real pleasure over the last year also to grow our corporate council. Many of you here today are corporate council members. It's a tremendous community of companies that are helping shape the future of climate resilience and sustainability across the harbor region. And through the corporate council, we've convened industry leaders from infrastructure, energy, engineering, and maritime to have candid conversations with government leaders about the future of the harbor and the challenges of implementation. Recent featured guests include NYSERDA CEO Doreen Harris, Deputy Mayor of Operations Julia Curson, and many others. And we're excited to continue growing this community. So if your company is looking to join these types of conversations, please come find me or anyone on the Waterfront Alliance staff. One person I'd really like to give special thanks to today is our Chief Waterfront Design Officer, Joseph Stutkowski, who I hope has made it into this room somewhere. Joseph will be concluding his time with Waterfront Alliance at the end of this month, and he's had such an enormous impact on WEDGE and our resilience work over the past 5 years. We will certainly miss him. I will very, very much miss him, but we are excited about continuing and building the momentum and the strong foundation that he created. A quick logistical note, CEU's continuing education credits from AIA and ASLA are available for all sessions. Engineering PDHs are also available for select sessions. There are QR codes throughout to track participation. Also, as we have for the past several years, thanks to Stantec, Hudson River Foundation, and Turner, SPC, sustainability is built into this event. I'm a former Department of Sanitation employee, so I'm also like a recycling nut and hate waste. Especially proud of the steps we've taken to reduce waste today. Obviously, all of our signage is recyclable, and we don't have plastic badge holders, no plastic water bottles, minimal paper use, which is why we're asking everyone to really rely on the app, which has all of the information that you need. And in addition to all of the information, it also has a networking game. So I don't know if anybody's had a chance to find that yet, but I hope you will participate because there are prizes. So you can earn points. There are different challenges throughout the day. I have a toddler, so I'm very oriented around incentivizing, but we have some great prizes from the South Street Seaport Museum. We have Waterfront Alliance merch and also concert tickets to Forest Hill Stadium, which is very cool. So you have to be here at the closing plenary. I will be announcing the winners. Lastly, for those of you going on the walking tour during lunch today, apparently it's 92 or 93 degrees and very sunny. So we have hats for sale, and those support the Waterfront Alliance. So check out the merch table on your way out. And now enough of the logistics, back to the good stuff. It is my great pleasure to invite our Director of Policy and Government Affairs, Tyler Taba, to the stage.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Julie. So nice to see everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Tyler. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Affairs here at the Waterfront Alliance. I'm really excited. We have a very short segment here before we go into our Dr. Edward Williams Waterfront Community Champion Awards with some of our Capstone students, or actually no longer students, graduated as of Friday, who have been working with the Waterfront Alliance since September on a project. And so we're really excited to have them up and to share a little bit about that work with you. So I'll ask them to join me up on the stage now. And I'll give you guys a mic that you can all share. All right, so this is not the first time that we've done something like this. Some of you may remember, I think 2 conferences ago, we had some students from NYU Wagner who had done a capstone project with us on looking at the economic implications of mandatory flood risk disclosure laws and how that might help with resiliency retrofits for homeowners and for renters. We also had a PACE intern last year who looked at resiliency retrofit for homeowners, options, costs, and all these things. So we've been really looking at this intersection of flooding and housing. But one thing that was always missing from that research was basement apartments. And that is a huge issue in the flooding landscape when it comes to housing. You may not think about basement apartments every day, but when it rains, when it's like when you get a storm like Hurricane Ida or Tropical Storm Ophelia, or now just unnamed rainfall events that are hitting our communities, basement apartments are typically, thank you, devastated. And in the worst cases, our neighbors in basement units can drown and die. And so we teamed up with these students, or now graduates, I'll keep messing that up, to look at this issue of what options exist for basement apartments with respect to resiliency retrofits. What are the costs of those retrofits? Are they cost effective for renters, for homeowners? And it's been really, really a great project, and we only have a short time to get through it, but there is a report that the students did, and they'll be here over the course of the day. And so if you have any questions that we don't get to in this session, please find them and ask them those questions. So to start off and to turn it over to you all, I'd like to maybe start by asking you if you could tell us a little bit. You created a cost-benefit model to look at what kind of costs retrofits for basement apartments take and what the benefits of those might be. So before you talk about the findings in the model, could you tell us a little bit about some of the inputs that you put into the model?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll keep it brief. Hi, everyone. I'm Owen Elton. And so, yeah, our model is a 25-year cash flow model. Some of the key inputs were the flood frequency across 15 different neighborhoods of different demographic and risk profiles, as well as kind of the expected damage per flood per basement. So we combined these looking at the financial efficacy of 5 of the most common basement retrofits, things like backwater valves or building ceiling, or just like elevating your utilities. So we looked at that across the different 15 risk categories, and so the damage that each of these would mitigate for a flood was the benefit. And it was, variable per year by how much it was flooding, and then the costs were the costs associated with purchasing and installing the retrofit, as well as maintenance, or if its lifetime is shorter than the examined period, then it would be, reinstalling. And so that was the kind of core of our model.
And you looked at different neighborhoods with different risk tolerances, right? Could you speak a little bit about some of those neighborhoods?
So we looked at high-risk neighborhoods that had more than 3 flood events per year, medium risk, and then low risk, which was around 2 events, to make sure that we were kind of covering every single possible scenario.
Great. And so those were the inputs in the model, and then you ran a model, right? And so what were the findings in that model?
So we found from our model that flood interventions can save around $3 million within that 25-year period, and that's just for the 15 neighborhoods that we looked at, not the whole city. And specifically, we found that backwater valves and building ceiling are the most cost-effective of the 5 measures that we looked at. And we can expect homeowners to save $10 to $15 per every dollar spent in the next 25 years on retrofit costs. And understanding that basement retrofitting is cost effective is important to know, because after speaking with a lot of experts and advocates, some of whom are in this room, we know that one of the biggest barriers homeowners are facing in implementing these retrofits is the upfront cost.
Hello? Yes. Okay, great. And then finally, the last question I have is just maybe and most importantly, there were some recommendations that came out of those findings, right? Do you guys want to share a little bit about what those recommendations were?
So based on the barriers we found kind of 2 paths for basement apartment conversions. One would be folding them into the New York State Resilient Retrofit Program and leaning on existing loan structures and administrative networks. This will save the city money long term. The other would be creating a new local law like LL 97 to stipulate that basement apartment conversions for flood resiliency happen by 2050. The city can work with local CDFIs to offer low-cost loans or grants, and provide one-on-one support to ensure success.
Great. And we have some folks, I think, from the New York State Office of Homes and Community Renewal who run the Resiliency Retrofit Program that maybe you guys can talk to. So we only had a few minutes here to talk about this project, but I wanted to offer the students, graduates, a chance here to talk a little bit about their work. The report will be on our website. And for anybody who's doing work around basement apartments or this intersection of housing and resilience, I hope we can work with you and try to come together for a more comprehensive housing and climate policy solutions, basement apartments typically being left out, but their research really helped us understand that there are solutions that are out there. The cost may be high up front, but they can be, they have dividends that pay off in the long run. And so, as the city also is going through its understanding of how rezonings are happening with City of Yes and what that means for basement apartments, legalization, pilots, and all these things, we really want to make sure that this is a part of that conversation and question. So we're really, really excited. We all have some homework, which is to take those recommendations and move them forward. And I just want to ask everyone for another round of applause for these great students who helped us, and congrats again on graduating. And then for our last segment before we break, I'm very excited to introduce and welcome Matthew Washington up to the stage.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Great to see you. I want to thank you all for clapping for me before I said anything. I feel like I've accomplished something already. So I'm thrilled to be here today, and I'm thrilled to have you all with us. It's a real pleasure to present the Dr. Ed Williams Waterfront Champion Awards today. But I'll tell you something. I found out that I was not going to be a recipient of this award because they called me and asked me to present the award. Maybe next year. But it's thrilling to be here. What an exciting day. So let me just tell you a little bit about this award. This is an award that honors community-based organizations and individuals who have championed community resilience in the face of the very real climate crisis. These awards are named in memory of Dr. Edward Williams, the founder and CEO of the Regional Ready Rockaway, who also served as president of the Far Rockaway branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. This accolade celebrates Dr. Williams' lasting legacy and profound impact on his neighbors and the entire region. We have 3 honorees for 2026. I'll introduce them shortly, and then I'll have them all up. We'll take a picture together, and we'll give them an opportunity to say a word. And just one thing I wanted to share very quickly about Dr. Ed Williams. The organization I work for is called Phipps Houses. We build affordable housing. We have a 1,700-unit development in Far Rockaway, Queens. Part of our development has a private street, and that street we named after Dr. Ed Williams in honor of his community work. And so it's especially exciting to be here to share in this award presentation. I did also want to encourage everyone to continue to participate in the game. I was leading until Julie mentioned that there was a game happening. Some guy named Tom was hot on my heels, so wherever you are, Tom, slow down, buddy. I like to win things, so I can't win. So now you got to beat me. I was just told I can't win. So, let me introduce our honorees, and then I'll call them up so we can take a picture and hear from them. So first, Elise Olivieri, a dedicated New York City public school educator with more than 20 years of experience teaching earth science at Curtis High School in Staten Island. With a deep commitment to authentic science education, Elise has conducted Hudson River water quality research through Columbia University's summer research program for science teachers at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, participated in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's, NOAA's, Teacher at Sea program in the Mid-Atlantic, and worked with James Cook University researchers on coral studies on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. At least you got to call me for your next trip. She has also created opportunities for her own students to conduct wetlands research through a multi-year Columbia University partnership. Our next awardee is Chauncey Young. Chauncey has dedicated over 20 years to organizing around education and community activism in the Bronx. He is the Director of Education Organizing at New Settlement Apartments. He also serves as coordinator for the Harlem River Working Group and has been a board member of the Council for Environmental Quality for nearly 20 years. Chauncey was also the chair of the successful campaign to reopen the High Bridge, New York City's oldest standing bridge, which connects the High Bridge section of the Bronx to the High Bridge section of Manhattan. And through Mayor Bloomberg's Plan YC in 2007, Chauncey was successful at securing $60 million for that project. Our third honoree is the New York Disaster and Interfaith Services, which brings together diverse faith communities, human service providers, and charitable organizations, and inspires, connects, and equips its network to serve neighbors in times of crisis and ongoing suffering, through coordinated disaster response and long-term recovery efforts, as well as support for mental health, housing, emergency supplies, and capacity building initiatives. NYDIS helps communities navigate crises while building resilience for the future by fostering interfaith collaboration and leveraging collective resources. NYDIS builds pathways toward recovery, preparedness, and sustainable well-being. And NYDIS is represented today by Peter Gudaitis, Executive Director and CEO, and Dr. Lucy Cummings, Director of Faith Sector Resilience. So, Elise, Chauncey, Peter, and Lucy, please join me on the stage. It is heavy. I can hold that for you.
That's all good.
I'll take it home for you if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, be careful. Be careful. Would like to go first.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you so much to the Waterfront Alliance for this incredible honor. I'm truly grateful. One of the greatest parts of teaching climate science is bringing students into the field, because the shoreline becomes a classroom without walls. When students can explore our waterways firsthand, they begin to understand not only how our environment works, but why protecting it matters so deeply. I'm so proud of my students and thankful to everyone who supports hands-on science education. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Really, thanks to the Waterfront Alliance for this recognition. As mentioned, Matthew mentioned, I've worked in the Highbridge neighborhood of the Bronx and in the South Bronx for the last 20 years. While my work is in schools officially, I'm a school organizer. The connection to community organizing is so essential, and also building coalitions. So to acknowledge, some of the partnerships that are necessary to make that possible. Our elected officials, our community members, our parent associations, our community organizations. The Harlem River Working Group is recently renamed to the Harlem River Coalition. We're part of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. Thank the Hudson River Foundation for their support with us. And we've advocated to reconnect people to the Harlem River for almost 20 years at this point. Since we reopened the High Bridge connects us to Manhattan, but when you get to the Bronx, we don't have a connection to our waterfront, right? And when you look at the Bronx comparison to New York City, you are a completely different world. 62 out of 62 counties in New York State in terms of health disparities. So getting access to greenways, getting access to waterfront is really essential. So thanks to New York City Parks, we're going to get canoeing and kayaking on the Bronx side of the Harlem River for the first time since Robert Moses took it away. So anyone want to sponsor a canoe? They're expensive. We're a nonprofit. We'll put your name on it. Thank you so much.
I'm really touched that we got this award primarily through Lucy's hard work, not mine. But Doc Williams was the first person I met with the morning after Hurricane Sandy made landfall here. We drove out to the Rockaways to check on the damage, and then to Coney Island, the Lower East Side, and the South Shore of Staten Island. All neighborhoods that are primarily populated by under-resourced communities and people of color who have remained vulnerable and continue to remain vulnerable to climate change. The greatest threat to life and safety in New York City today is climate change. 500 New Yorkers die every year from heat. That is more than are killed by murder in New York City. Our houses of worship, about 40% of them are in the coastal flood zones. Those are the social safety net institutions for all of the neighborhoods across the city. And so we're really grateful to be recognized for Lucy's work and thankful to Con Edison and Verizon and the health department that fund our faith sector resilience partnerships and our climate adaptation and climate audit programming. So I remember Doc Williams fondly, and I hope he'd be thrilled that we're up here. Thank you.
Can we give another round of applause for all of our honorees? Thank you, and I want to let you know we're going to take a 20-minute break. Breakout sessions start at 10:45. There is coffee available for you, and I want you all to know that you're welcome to take a picture with me too during this break. So I am available. Please make a line. Don't push anybody. Enjoy your break and enjoy the sessions at 10:45. Thank you all for being here.
One correction, we'll start sessions at 10:50. 10:50. Enjoy your break.